French nationals who fled to fight with Islamic State in Syria could be facing trial in Kurdish-held territory, not back in France.
If in Syrian Kurdistan there are judicial institutions that are capable of assuring a fair trial with guaranteed rights of defence, they will be judged there.
Debate over what action should be taken against jihadists holding French passports has been gathering pace. That's since the arrest of a notorious female recruiter in Syria last month. She was blacklisted by both the UN and the US and is said to have recruited more than 200 French citizens. According to a US-based research group, more than 1,500 extremists of French origin joined ISIL's ranks over a 3-year period, and around 300 of them have since returned to France. Let's get further into this. I'm happy to say that expert on terrorism at Loughborough University, Lewis Harrington, joins us live on the programme. Lewis, good to have your company. What do you think of Benjamin Griveau's proposal, taking into account, of course, Syrian Kurdistan? It's not even an independent state, of course. What do you think is driving his call?
Well, I think clearly this individual, the lady involved, before she went to Syria, was heavily involved as a jihadist recruiter. Bringing her back to France to stand trial could incite others to commit acts. There's nothing of any interest to bring her back for that. I think the French would rather see her languish in Kurdish jails for years to come. But the reality is, in the Islamic State, she was a mother of 3 children. I'm not quite sure for what crimes that she's going to be tried for by the Peshmerga, and so it makes more sense that if she is guilty, and remember, this is a fight for our values, that we believe in innocent until proven guilty, that if there is evidence it should be transferred from the Kurdish authorities to the French prosecutors, and she should stand trial in France if that is the case.
That's the big point, isn't it? Can suspected terrorists expect a fair trial in Syrian Kurdistan? Well,
I mean, I see no reason why, if there is evidence that the Kurdish are not, they're not incapable of holding a trial, I don't think that's really the issue. I think that if this lady is being held by the Peshmerga, it's at the behest of the French, and it's surprising. Actually, we've really seen a paradigm shift from, say, during the 1990s, when in Yemen there was 8 Brits, 2 French nationals were held when they were arrested in relation to a terrorism plot. We know about that because Abu Hamza al-Masri, the cleric with the hooks, is now serving time in the US for that plot. All of the individuals involved in that Yemeni plot were quickly repatriated, given a great deal of assurance. And yet now it seems, 15 years later, nobody wants to have any of the US estimate there's 40,000 foreign fighters from 120 countries. It's of nobody's interest to have these people return to their homeland, simply because the de-radicalization programs that we have in place now, they can't even do anything with the guys who've not been on the front lines. How are these de-radicalization programs going to cope with hardened jihadists that may return? It's not feasible. It's better to keep them languishing in Syrian jails, keep them at arm's bay for as long as possible.
Does this not open up, though, at the proverbial can of worms, because you've got an area which has no actual state protocol in Syrian Kurdistan, actually trying people of a foreign country, maybe en masse? There were a lot of terrorists in that region, of course. They fought on the ground. But it does open up the question about whether or not this is legal at all.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it depends on how you frame the events in Syria. Was this a war? Are these individuals prisoners of war? Are they captives now? I mean, we're looking at a criminal aspect, but there's also the sort of the issue of how do we see the conflict in Syria? How can these people, and these women were of course picked up on the battlefield, so were a number of foreign fighters. If we're calling it a battlefield, not a crime scene, then what exactly are we prosecuting them for in the first place? Whether or not it's even in Kurdistan, or whether it's in France or the UK or wherever they're returned to, what exactly are the crimes that we're looking at?
Just picking up on the point of those the returning jihadists to France, how big of a risk is it to Paris? We saw 300, I believe, roughly have come back. Do you see this as a big problem?
Well, let's consider in March 2016, one of the individuals involved in the Brussels attacks, he was a returnee from Turkey. But I think realistically, we've got so many individuals coming back that picking out...
It's going to be very hard to track them, is it not?
It's going to be... I mean, the security services across Europe are already stretched. The counterintelligence work is already stretched in the UK and in France. But of course, the French have got a better experience of this because of Algeria. The French are better at this, at tracking individuals when they come back. But ultimately, the security services have to get it right every single time. It only takes 2 or 3 of these individuals to cause absolute devastation. And we've seen that for the last few years throughout Europe, 2013 to 2017, in Paris, in London, certainly here in London throughout last year. It doesn't take a great deal of individuals, and certainly ones that have been battle-hardened in Syria, certainly trained up, pose a great threat, however they return to Europe. It's a threat that's going to be facing us for many years to come.
Yeah, and France still, of course, in that state of emergency, isn't it? Lewis Harrington, tourism expert at Loughborough University. Thanks for your take, as always, Lewis.